Okay, this is from Chapter 1 of Course 1, and it is Lesson 1, Part A. And what we're going to first talk about before we talk about the entire chapter of multiplying and dividing decimals, we're going to talk today about just estimating products. It's good to have a working knowledge of how to round decimals and how to estimate your products so that when you do get into the meat of multiplying and dividing, that you can have a way to check the reasonableness or if it's pretty close to accurate. So the goal for today, within your book, if you always look at the top of that first part of the lesson, you're going to have a main idea, the goal or the objective. They all mean the same thing. What we're going to talk about today is estimating the product of decimals and judging the reasonableness of the result. So before we hop into some examples, let's move back just a little bit and talk about what estimation is and take a peek at rounding. Okay, so when we have numbers and we're getting ready to round, there are some things that we remembered from last year. The first thing that we kind of have in our working knowledge is 4 or less, let it rest. And then we also have 5 or more, let it soar. Now, if you have no idea what I'm talking about when I say those two things, let me explain to you. So when we have a decimal like 1 and 2/10, and we want to know where that decimal or what's the closest whole number. So what we're going to do is we're going to underline that whole number, and then we're going to circle the first digit to the right. The digit to the right of the place value that we're rounding always tells us what to do. So this is where we remember these little rhymes. So if that digit to the right is 4 or less, you let the number rest. If that digit is 5 or more, you let the next place value soar. So looking at it being 2, we know that's 4 or less. So we're going to let our number rest. And 1 2/10 is closest to the whole number 1. If you're still struggling to see what I'm talking about, let's go, not to there, let's go here to a number line. Number lines are great visuals for helping you round. We're going to take a closer look at this number line. Ooh, I don't want to go that close. Let's try that again. All right, so here we are. We have between the whole numbers 1 and 2, and we want to figure out where 1 2/10 is closer to. So looking at that visual representation, you probably are realizing, hey, it's closer to the whole number 1. But, it just once again emphasizes that if it's at the 5, 5 or more, you're going to soar. And 4 or less, you're going to let it rest. Okay? Kind of that halfway point. If it's halfway there, you're going to keep going. If it's not halfway yet, you're just going to drop down. It's kind of what I visualize in my head as this number line kind of helps me when I'm doing rounding. All right, so let's go back and then practice with a couple more. Let's say I have 4 and 75/100. Still want to round to the nearest whole number. Okay, sometimes too, just as some working knowledge that it kind of works for me, when I think of decimals, I always think of money. It just really kind of helps me, think of that. When I'm looking at 4 and 75/100, in my mind, I'm thinking $4.75. So right now I'm pretty much telling myself I have almost $5. It's kind of another way that I work that out. But using our rounding, let's look at it rounding to the nearest whole number. Underlining that 4, going to look to the digit to the right. The 5 is not going to tell me to do anything. It's only that digit to the right that's going to tell you where to go. Okay, so am I going to soar to 5? Am I going to rest at 4? 7 is 5 or more. We're going to let it soar. If we visualize a number line, we have 4 and 75/100, right about there. So you kind of visualize it being closer to 5, or you could break it apart by, going on that way to kind of make your number line. But knowing that 4 and 75/100 is more than, 4 and 50/100, like a $half. Okay, so you are almost to 5. And one more practice of rounding. Let's do 3 and 41 hundredths. 3 and 41 hundredths. Once again, if you're thinking about money, 3 and 41 cents. Okay, are you closer to probably about $3, or are you almost to $4? If that visual doesn't help you, then you go to the rounding. You have the 3 is going to look at the 4. 1 has nothing to do with it. 4 is going to tell you if it needs to soar or if it needs to rest. Remember, 4 or less, you let the 3 rest. Okay, visualizing that number line. You have 3 and 41 hundredths between the whole numbers 3 and 4. It's not halfway yet, because 3, think of it like 3 and 50 cents, or 3 and 50 hundredths is halfway. So it's less than halfway, so it rests. All right, let's go back to our student edition then and kind of look at how this kind of works in the real world. We do this a lot. We estimate a lot. You talk to your parents, they round all the time when they're in the grocery store, when they go shopping, budgeting to see if they have enough money. You kind of can do it in the meat department, you know. You never weigh anything, or in the produce department, nothing ever weighs to a whole number, a whole pound. So you have parts of a pound, you know, 3 and 25 hundredths of a pound, and then they sell it for $2.85 per pound. So you're left there kind of trying to figure that out. So let's look over here at, you know, another real world example, and we'll kind of do some of those other examples together when you're in class, but we're just going to look over this page. What I want you to notice is throughout your book, when you have a key concept, they're going to walk you through it step by step. So if you're not going to listen to the recording, you can always go back to this and it's going to tell you what to do. All right, so we have a skateboarder, and the record distance for travel, or greatest distance traveled on skateboard in 24 hours was set by James Peters in 2007. He traveled about 7 6/10 miles per hour. Okay, so the first thing they want us to do is round 7 6/10 to the nearest whole number. Underline the whole number, circle the digit to the right. Am I going to soar? Am I going to rest? 6 is 5 or more, and let it soar. So we have 8. Okay. Now we're going to estimate how many miles James Peters traveled in 24 hours. Okay. So we have 24 hours times 8 miles per hour. So for every hour, he's going about 8 miles. 8 times 4 is 32. 2 stays in the ones place, carry the 3 to the next place. Okay, so now we have 8 times 2 tens. That's going to give you 16 tens, plus those 3 tens, so we have 192. 192 miles. Okay. Is your estimate higher or lower than the actual distance he traveled? Explain. Okay, so when we think about this, we rounded up. So our rounding went up to 8. So the actual distance is going to be lower. Or what our estimate, I hit the wrong button. Sorry, guys. Our estimate, let me look at that again. Our estimate is going to be higher, is going to be higher than the actual distance, because for every mile we took out 4/10 of a mile because we rounded up to 8. So there's 4/10 here that we rounded up. So we are 4/10 times 24 times higher. Okay, so I'm going to explain that more to you while you're in class. But when you round up, you have to kind of visualize in your head that the actual distance is going to be a little bit less. And we'll see that as we work together with estimating. All right. Sorry, I'm going to see if I can move down on this page. And of course, it's going slow for me. This is one thing I always loved about math, my higher math books, as I got more into more intense math, is that they always kind of put an example in there for you. So as you're doing some of your work and you get hung up on something, you can always come back to the book, and the book is going to walk you step by step kind of through some of the things that we're talking. Otherwise, you can always rewatch the video. So when we have something like 8 7/10 and 2 8/10, visually kind of like, you know, you're going to buy 8 7/10 pounds of hamburger. for each pound of hamburger, it costs $2.80. About how much money is it going to cost you to buy that? So we would take 8 7/10, round it to 9, 2 8/10, and round it to 3. 9 times 3 is 27. Going to give us a quick idea to see how much money we're going to spend. Can ask ourselves, is the actual cost going to be higher or lower? Well, it's actually going to be lower than $27 because we rounded up with both of those numbers. So we have 3/10 here and we have 2/10 here. So for every pound, we're 5/10 off or 50 cents off. And that's another way of looking at it. So you can practice with some of that estimation here. Sorry, Smartboard's not cooperating. All right, there's one last thing I want to go over. It's another real world situation where you're going to use estimation and you're going to round, you're going to let that number soar, and then you're going to let that number rest to get a ballpark in between how much money you need to spend. So we're going to look at the school supplies scenario. Patrice has $20 to buy 5 binders for her classes. She found binders that cost $4.29 each. Does she have enough money to buy these binders? Explain your reasoning. When we have something like that and we're doing quick calculations in our head, we take that $4.29 and we do 2 things to it. So we have $4.29. If we are just simply rounding, we know that we're going to look at this. The 2 is going to tell us to rest, so we're going to be at $4. We take those 5 binders times those $4, and we know that that's about $20. But we only have $20. So is that enough? So is the actual cost going to be higher, or is it going to be lower than that $20? Well, for every binder, we took out 29 cents. So we have 29 cents times 5. So the actual price is going to be higher than $20. So sometimes what we do is, as consumers, as shoppers, we say then, okay, let's round $4.29 to $5. $5. That's going to give us $25. So the binders aren't going to cost us any more than $25, and they're not going to be any less than $20. So actually, they're going to be in between $20 and $25 when we go up to the cashier to pay. So we actually do not have enough money to buy the binders. So sometimes in real world scenarios, we do that where we round to, we let it rest, and then we round and let it soar, and then we take those digits in between to see a ballpark if we're going to be about right with our money. Just a good way to so when you go up to the cashier, you don't look kind of silly. All right, so thank you for watching the video. When you come to school tomorrow, we're going to work on rounding, decimals, and multiplication. All right.